Good evening, friends, and welcome to today's webinar. We will be talking about Spark streaming and how is it helping us to ingest real-time data. So when we talk about real-time data, I'm talking about basically the data which is getting generated on the fly. And if such a data is available, then how do you process that data? Spark is a big data tool, which is basically a processing, distributed processing framework or distributed computing framework. And in that, we have one of the module which is called as streaming module, Spark streaming module, which helps us create this real-time data pipelines, data ingestion pipelines, which would help us consume the real data. At the same time, it is processing this data. Right? Now, when we talk about real-time data, it is always near real-time. Will not have absolute real-time. For example, as and how the data is getting generated, you cannot process it. Right? It would be near real-time. So Spark streaming is called as near real-time. We will see how close or how near the Spark streaming can process the data in the real time, how close we can go. But what is Spark streaming? That's the first thing that we need to understand. So as I explained, Spark, let me just go to that. I'll come back to this. So Spark is a distributed computing framework which is said to have 100 times speed when compared to any of your MapReduce framework, which is basically from your big data tools. So if you have to process this big data, then we have something called as MapReduce under Hadoop, which is basically distributed computing framework. If it takes 100 minutes to complete a task, then Spark can complete the same task within 1 minute. That's the speed of Spark, which is not depending on MapReduce framework. This is generalized framework. It's called as generalized framework, which Spark uses. And Spark is open source. Just like how we have Python and R as open source, Spark is also an open source tool. And it is computing tool. And the advantage of Spark is it is working with distributed memory framework. Distributed memory framework, a computing framework, right? So it uses memory basically for computing, and that's the reason it is very fast when compared to any of the other big data tools, MapReduce. Now, another very good advantage for data scientists or data analysts is that Spark codes can be written in any of the 4 languages. You can see here, it can be written in Scala. This is like the mother tongue for Spark because Spark is developed using Scala language, which is also known as hybrid programming language. We can also write Spark codes using Java. Most of you are familiar with R programming or Python programming. So any one of these programming, if you know, then you're good to go with Spark codes. Remember, I said Spark is a framework. It's a distributed in-memory cluster computing framework. That means Spark would give an execution environment. It creates an execution environment, and in that environment, you can write your Spark codes in one of these programming languages and get the execution done. And as I said, it is a big data tool and it is a distributed computing framework So like this, you'll have multiple computers interconnected. One would be the master. The rest of the nodes or computers would be the worker computers, worker nodes, right? And the code gets executed among all these particular worker nodes. So the code that we write is getting distributed, and part of the code gets executed in these nodes. So parallel processing happens, parallel and distributed processing happens. If I have to explain it in a very, very crude way, how many computers I have here which are interconnected? 10 plus 1. This one is instructing or controlling the execution, and all these 10 executions or 10 computers would execute the job. Now let's say I have 100 lines of code, okay, 100 lines of code. So I'm explaining in a very crude way. Don't literally take this example. So if I have 100 lines code, right, and if I want to execute this on this environment, then let's say each of this node that you're seeing or computer you're seeing is going to execute 10 lines parallelly, all at one go. Split the code and execute 10 lines each. Now you can see how quickly the code can get executed, right? So that is distributed computing framework for you in a very, very, very crude way. But literally, this is not what happens. Okay, just to explaining, I have taken this example, right? So we are talking about big data tools, friends. Going forward in future, we would be working on big data only. When I say big data, I'm talking about terabytes or petabytes of data, because data is growing, right? And if you still want to use Python in future and say I want to implement a machine learning algorithm using Python, then it would be very, very slow, because it has to share, right, process this kind of share data. So your computing capability of a single computer would not be good enough. So we are taking multiple computers and doing the same execution. Okay. And for distributed computing, Python directly cannot be used. Hence we use Spark. Okay. So that is a quick overview of Spark. And in Spark, we have multiple modules. Spark SQL basically is a SQL query engine. You would be able to work on big data using SQL commands, structured data which is in big data. If you want to process that, then Spark SQL can be used. Spark streaming is what we are trying to understand now. I will talk about this in detail. Then another module that we have in Spark is MLlib, which is machine learning library. So Spark is used for machine learning implementations like Python or R. Remember, I said any one of the programming languages here listed here can be used for Spark execution, right? So if you want to implement machine learning on very, very big data, huge data, then R would anyways crash. We know that. Python might work depending on the memory capabilities that we have in the computer, but still it would take a lot of time, right? But if you want quick results, then you might want to use Spark, right? So there, the machine learning algorithms will be implemented using Spark. And we have a lot of inbuilt packages for Spark as well. Just like how we have R packages, Python packages for machine learning, we also have a lot of packages inbuilt for Spark also, for doing a lot of operations here. Then we have graphics. GraphX is used to do network analysis. Is used to do network analysis. That means when I have a social network, I want to process and understand who is the most influential person in that entire social network, then you would be applying these network analysis where concepts where you would be calculating centralities, degree centrality, eigenvector centrality, closeness centrality, bitweakness centrality. So all those calculations can be done using this module, GraphX module in Spark, right? So this way we have different modules. Now, what is so different in Spark which keeps it standable from the rest of the codes, rest of the programming languages? As I said, it is a distributed in-memory cluster computing framework. So we would be using this for processing or computing the data in a cluster of networks, and that cluster of network, a cluster of computers, not network, sorry. When I say cluster of computers, I'm talking about group of computers, guys, which are interconnected, right? So we are computing on these interconnected computers, and Spark uses memory of all these computers for calculations and of course for storage and processing of the data quickly happens in the memory itself, and it is distributed, right? Because I have some memory here, I have some memory here, I have some memory here, some memory here. If I consider this as a very big computer, then you can see that my entire memory is nothing but a collection of these pieces of memory which are there in multiple computers. So my memory is distributed, right? So that's the concept. Distributed cluster computing, of course, in memory, right? So if you want to use memory for computation, right, your data should also be there in the memory. Only then you will be able to process it, right? So in Spark, we will not use data frame as the default abstraction. Data frames are the default data abstraction for Python and R, right? Data frame is nothing but table structure, which is default for R and Python. But in Spark, we have something called as a data frame API, which is giving us something called as RDD. It is nothing but your data element. Okay, that means the default data structure or data abstraction in Spark is RDD, which is called as resilient distributed data set. Resilient distributed data set. What exactly is resilient distributed data sets? If you see here in the diagram, there are a lot of data sources, right? These are all the softwares where the data is residing. Now Spark can directly connect to these data sources using a lot of APIs which are readily available. Spark is more like a plug and play software, and you can directly integrate it with various data sources. And in each of this data source here, the data will have, or data is stored in different formats, right? CSV format or table format, JSON format, NoSQL, Paraquet formats. So different formats would be there in your data sources. Now, if I want to work on these data, then in Python, I would, or in R for that matter, I would convert the data into table format, and that table format is called as data frame. The same concept. If you have to work on any data in Spark, then that data has to be stored in memory of your cluster computers. It has to get stored, or it has to be loaded into memory. But memory is very small. Hello, can you hear me, guys?
Yes, Sarath.
Yeah, I think there was a brief disconnect due to the network. So hope you have got out all these concepts that I'm trying to explain. Any questions till now in Spark? I'm just giving you a quick overview of Spark, guys. Any questions? Okay. So let me go back to this Spark streaming concept. Okay. Now let's say there is a scenario where um, a flight is going on, right? An airplane is traveling, right? A single flight engine would be small, okay, small single engine flight. If you look at it, it would be yeah, connected with more than 5,000 sensors. And these sensors relentlessly generate data of around 10 GB per second. Okay, or sorry, 5 GB per second. If it is a twin engine airplane, then it generates 10 GB. Okay, so if I look at a small example of 12-hour flight, okay, there is a 12-hour flight assume, then it would generate more than 800 terabytes of data. This is a real-time example. You can try and search online. If there is a 12 hours journey which a airplane takes, a small airplane takes, then it generates around 800 and some 844 or something, 800 terabytes of data. Okay, this is a small example. Now, if I have to generate that, if you look at, let's say 10 GB per second data as an example, you have to first store this data, and rather than storage, the most important concept that you have to look at is how do you draw information from this data which is getting generated relentlessly on real time. When I say real time, as in how the flight is going by, you have to extract information from that data which is getting generated. If you are doing that, then you can be taking, you would be able to take a real-time decisions in case of any accident, right? Any mishap. Say for example, one of the module, one of the component of airplane is failing. Then what you do? What we need to do? If there is a component failure in a live flight, which is actually right in progress, I mean it is doing that flight midway, if there is a component failure, what happens? If it is a critical component, right, the airplane might crash, killing all the people in that flight, isn't it? Now we might say that, hey, I'm getting this data generated, right? Why don't I store it and do processing on that and identify what has happened, right? You can identify that, but you're not going to stop the crash if you're doing that, right? It is an offline analysis that you're doing after the flight is landed. But if you want to look at a scenario wherein you want to save lives, then you have to get the information on live, right? Now, how do I process such a huge volume of data on the fly as it is getting generated, right? So that's a big concern for a lot of real-time applications. So when we talk about Spark Streaming, Spark extends this particular processing capability to a large stream of data. Now this Spark is a scalable application or software which can scale up to hundreds and thousands of computers. That basically means if I have 1,000 computers interconnected, I can still use Spark. Even if I have 5,000 computers interconnected, even then I can simply upscale my Spark. If you don't require such a capability for processing, so you don't need 5,000 computers for processing, then you can simply remove the additional computers that are not required. So it is plug and play architecture, as I said, right? So it scales up to hundreds of nodes, and also the computation is very, very, very fast. The computation is very fast, and you can see the latency is only in seconds. Latency means the time taken for any code to give the result, right? And it is only in seconds. And Spark also has fault tolerant mechanism. That means if one of the computers in your network or in your big data setup fails, let's say these are my computers, interconnected computers in the cluster. Let's say one of the computer fails. Even in such cases, the data is not lost and the processing is not halted, right? It is automatically taking care of the processing which was happening here. That processing is passed on to another computers which are readily available. So that load balancing fault tolerance mechanism is internally taken care by Spark. Right? And yeah, these are many applications. You can see these are all the examples. Social network trends, website statistics, ad impressions, flight analytics data, IoT sensors, for example. You want to build smart devices, right? In such cases, constantly you have to look at the sensors data which is generated by these machines. Okay. Now we are working on wind turbine failure prediction. Wind turbine failure prediction model, where the IoT sensors relentlessly generate data. This data is then consumed by Kafka applications, Kafka consumers, and that data is being processed by Spark streaming modules, and the reports are generated. And these reports are basically generated in Tableau. Dashboards are getting generated. And whenever there is, let's say, a failure prediction happening, then there would be an alert in the reports, which is automatically sending an email saying that, hey, there is a component in your wind turbine which might fail. And these are the critical readings which are shown on the IoT sensors. So this is kind of the data that we are doing, and here the data is getting relentlessly generated, and we have to process that data on the fly as and how it is getting generated. This is one of the applications, friends, that we are working on. right? So like this, you can think about a number of examples, especially your time series would be a streaming data, right? Continuously the data is getting streaming and you want to process that. Then you can use Spark Streaming. Now we have a lot of distributed processing frameworks. On top of Hadoop, there are a lot of distributed frameworks. We have Flume, we have Storm, right? So very other major other applications are also there. Let me talk about Storm. This Storm is basically a data storage mechanism. As and how the data gets generated, Storm is consuming the data and it stores the data onto HDFS, which happens to your storage, distributed storage framework. And here, once the data is stored, you will be using MapReduce to process that. So basically what you're doing is, you are storing the data real time, but the processing is happening on batch mode. It is not on real time mode, it is batch mode applications that we are writing here. So we have to have two different systems. One is for storage, one is for the processing. That's the problem with the distributed stream processing frameworks that we have. Right? Now, so the existing frameworks either do stream processing of hundreds of MBs with low latency. Low latency basically means it is executing a little fast. Execution happens a little faster. Right? So basically what is it doing? It is reading the data for, let's say, 100 seconds. Or sorry, 100 MBs. That means if I have some terabytes of data that is getting generated, I would take some MB of the data and then do the process. Right? I'm basically breaking up the data. Right? Or you take the complete data and do a batch processing. These are the two applications, or these are the two approaches that we have. Now, we take the first approach in Spark Streaming, right? And get the execution a little bit faster, low latency execution. And it is automatically taken care by Spark Streaming modules. If I use traditional techniques, then these are the problems. You need to have two different modules. One for Storm, the other one is for MapReduce framework. That means the code increases, the number of bugs increases, maintenance task increases, integration between these two systems is increasing, right? So yeah, this would be your situation. Yeah. So Spark Streaming is basically looking into the first option, which is continuously doing the job, but it does that job on a small batch of data. So rather than you wait for the complete data to get recorded, we collect the data in a container. So let's say this is the data that is getting generated relentlessly without any breaks. This data is stored in a container. But you might ask, how much data is there in each of the container? Then that data size is basically decided by how much data is getting generated here. Velocity, what is the velocity of the data, right? But the containers has one parameter defined, which is the time. So rather than size, here we deal with time. For example, I'll put a container, small container for this data which is continuously getting generated. it gets stored here. I'll say for 1 second, whatever the data that I'm coming in or getting in, I'll collect it in this container. 1 second. So this is 1 second. Then this is again another 1 second, 1 second, right? Like this, for each second, I would collect the data and use this buckets or these containers for processing. So run a streaming computation as a series of very small deterministic batch jobs. So what is it doing? It is taking this one container and applies whatever the job that I want to apply on that, right? So on this, I would do that same job. Here also I do the same job. Here also I do the same job. Here also I do the same job. This is how Spark streaming actually works. So live data stream, right? And the Spark streaming is going to take batches of X seconds of data, right? So chop up the live stream into batches of X seconds. And Spark treats each of this batch as one RDD. Spark would understand only RDDs, right? So we want to convert the live data which is coming in into RDD form. That is done by Spark streaming. And once we get these RDDs, we use our regular Spark application to process that, right? And the final output result would also be written in the batches as well. Now, how much second we can collect the data? What is the time frame? The least time frame? It is 0.5 seconds or half a second, right? So your container can take half a second data. That's the least we can go, or close to the real time that we can go, right? So here we are combining the capabilities of batch processing and streaming processing. So I get live stream data. So here I'm doing stream processing. The data is then chopped into batches, and using these batches you would be working on your code or do the process, and the output also is given here in batches, of course. Now when I talk about this batches, right? Batches of data. These batches of data are basically called as D stream. Discretized stream, which is nothing but a series of RDDs. The default data structure in Spark is RDD. So my live data is discretized with respect to X time seconds, and each of that discretized batch is nothing but an RDD, and collection of those RDDs is nothing but D stream, right? So you have input D stream and output D stream, and Spark can read data directly from these sources. HDFS is your Hadoop distributed framework or file system. We have Kafka brokers where the live data can be consumed and processed. Flume is another data storage or data pipeline, real-time data pipeline ingestion tool. Basically, it is to process the real-time data. And we have Akka Actors. These are another tool for working with real-time data. And TCP sockets. Generally, this is where you would try to get your IoT sensor data. Of course, you will also have Kafka brokers created, and these Kafka brokers consume the data from these IoT sensors. So you can use Kafka also in short. So they are very, very easy to write the receivers. I mean, receiver code is very easy. And when you are trying to save the data, it can be saved onto the console, it can be saved onto your text file, it can be saved onto your Hadoop, it can be saved in a RDD form. So these are multiple options that we have. Okay. Now, when I talk about Spark, Spark has master slave architecture. Okay, any big data concept that you look at when you talk about distributed framework, they work with this master slave architecture. That means when I have a cluster of computers interconnected, one computer would act as master. The remaining computers are acting on the instructions given by these master nodes. These are called as nodes or computers. This one is master, and all these are slave computers. Right? Now, when you are working on these live real-time data, the D streams, then master actually records the information about these streams to something called as a checkpoint file. So we'll have a metadata where the information about these streams is recorded. And if any of these node is failed, then the information about the D stream is available in the master node. Right? And this checkpoint file is periodically updated so that we have the latest information about the D streams. Remember, it is a continuous process, right? So we have to periodically keep updating your checkpoint file. But this scenario is fine when your slave node is faulted. But what if your master node fails? Right? So when master node fails, we have this checkpoint file which is saved as a backup. Right? So what we do, we bring up this master node which is failed manually, of course. The admin has to do this. Admin understands why this node is down. He applies some solutions to bring it up. And let's say he brought this service up. The master service or master node is now up. Because of the node failure, all the information that it had previously might be formatted. So some of the data is this is live data, right? So this is a live pipeline, data ingestion pipeline, where the data is getting relentlessly passed. So when the master node is failed, the information, the historical information about the data that is already stored and processed would not be there, right? But if I have a checkpoint file like this, as an admin, once the services are up and running on the master node, I would refer to this checkpoint file to restart the actions from where it is halted. Right to that point, we go back and restore the services or start working on the services. Now, there is a lot of research which is happening here. It's an open source community, right? So a lot of research is happening where an automatic master failure is being developed. So you don't need to have an admin coming in picture. Automatically, if master fails, the server Spark's master fails, Spark is going to recover that master or the services in some manner. I mean, it uses the backup file, checkpoint file automatically. It looks into a standby master node, one of the data node, or one of the slave node could be a master node, right? So that way it is being developed. It's not yet released. There is no mechanism at this point of time, but yeah, research is going on. Now, remember I said how the worker actually is, if worker fails, then how the failover happens or fault tolerance happens. So what we are doing basically, the live data which is coming in is being discretized, broken down into RDD, and the processing happens in the memory of your nodes. Let's say these are all your slave nodes. Now let's say continuously the data is getting generated, and when the RDD is being processed or worked on, big data tools have a concept called as replication. Replication means making a copy, right? So Spark streaming replicates this data. makes a duplicate of the data just for fault tolerance scenarios. Now let's say here one of the node is failed. Let's say this node, you can see the last node here is gone. So some of the data which is being processed, the blue RDD that you see here, right? This processed data is gone, right? Due to loss in worker, data is also lost. But because I have a replication of this RDD, I can recreate or replicate that information, last partitions of your RDD into a working worker nodes, other nodes basically. Yeah, so this is how it works. We are working on real-time data. It is discretized. You get RDD and you're using Spark streaming for processing the data. So orange ones became blue ones. But let's say one of the node is failed. So data is lost, right? But thanks to this replication concept, that is duplication concept in Spark streaming, we know what is lost, and hence we are going to bring that in the memory of other nodes. Remember, Spark is in memory cluster computing. I'm not talking about physical storage here, right? So the data is only in memory, not on disk. So that gives us that flexibility to regenerate the failed node. Right? So let me quickly show you the code on how the processing is actually happening. Okay, very small code. Gist of things. So this is a virtual machine that I have, wherein I have Linux instance created. This is my Linux box, and I have Hadoop installed and Spark installed. Spark and Hadoop are installed. I have a code called streaming_wordcount.py. Let me show you the code. Let me increase the font size. So this is the code that we have. Now remember, I said Spark is a computing framework, right? So execution engine has to be defined. That execution engine in Spark is nothing but Spark context. Spark context. So for Spark, if you want to work with Python, then you need to call Python library, and that library is PySpark. Right? And if you want to work with R, then we have Spark R. For Java, you will not have a REPL. Java is not a interactive programming language, so you will not have a console. Right? The code can be written in some text file and then compiled into a class file. So for Java, you will not have anything. Scala, if you want to use, then the library is Spark Shell. Spark Shell. Right? So because I am dealing the code with Python language, I have to invoke or call PySpark library. And using this PySpark library, I am defining my Spark context. I'm importing that function which can help me create the execution environment. Okay. And on top of the Spark context, I am also importing streaming context. So how do you stream the data and then execute it using Python, right? So on top of Spark context, I'm putting a wrapper, which is streaming context. This is to read the live data and this is to process the data using Spark. So Spark context I am defining here, and here I am saying local in square brackets 2. This 2 is basically talking about the number of threads that would be used for processing your code. If your cluster has more number of CPUs, then you can assign, or this is basically for local execution, not cluster execution. If your computer has multiple threads, then you can define the number of threads that Spark has to use. If you're aware of that number of threads, you can assign it here. So here I'm basically saying 2 threads. That means 2 processes will happen. I mean, the processing will happen using 2 threads parallel. If you're not sure how many threads your computer has, your laptop has, then you can put local star. Star basically is automatically defining how many logical threads are possible based on your computer's CPU, the capability, and it internally defines those number of threads. If you say just local without giving this data, then that means you are using a single thread alone, right? So here I'm using 2 threads. I'm defining that as my Spark context, and I've given some name, word count. Okay, the data which is coming on the network, I'm taking that and I'm counting the words, number of words. This is Spark context. On this Spark context, I have to put a wrapper for streaming the data as well, to understand the live stream data. So I'm defining here the streaming context, which would wrap on top of Spark context. Now this 3 is basically the number of seconds that we have to create an RDD for. That's the interval, right? You can go as low as 0.5. So here I'm saying 3 seconds, so that every 3 seconds, the data is treated as 1 RDD. 3 seconds interval. You can change it to 5 seconds to understand the code that is executing, or you can say 0.5 to get the execution done faster. Now, where do I get the input stream? Right? Remember, I said the data can be read directly from TCP sockets, Kafka brokers, so on and so forth. Yeah, so on and so forth, right? Here, I am creating an input data stream, assuming that there is some network TCP socket which is connected, and on that port, I am getting the data generated. Okay, I'm creating basically a terminal which keeps generating the data. Okay, and that terminal is nothing but your local host. Local host is your computer, and the data that I would read is on this port number 9999. Say for example, if you are having an IoT sensor which is pushing the data from the sensor, from the hardware, that data has to be recorded, right? It has to be reading, consumed. So that would generate on this host and this port. So this is like a connection, a channel where your live data gets created. So this is something that I have created using text stream. That means I basically give text data. You can imagine Twitter application. So on Twitter, if you want to do some kind of analysis, Twitter data, you might want to first read the data, right? The data on Twitter would be text data, right? So you can use the same syntax, same code for extracting data from Twitter as well. Now, once the text data is given, this is your lines D stream, I'm applying a function called flat map to split that sentences into words. So I take line of code and split that line of code using this space delimiter. So wherever there is space, I treat that as one word. Okay, so this would become your words data stream. Words are continuously coming in. Now on that words, I create this syntax. So I'll take one word and then I assign one to it, counter. And that counter is getting added here. Reduce by key, this is the key. Sorry, this is the key and this is the value. Reduce by key means I'll take the word, keyword, and see how many words are there, the keywords are there, right? And simply add these ones for a specific given word. So reduce by key, this is the key I want to reduce, right? Those words. So what I do, I just add ones for all the words which are repeated, same words which are getting repeated. That would be saved in this word counts data stream. And this pprint is basically to print the data on the console. Okay. Now, because this is a streaming process, Spark would not know when to terminate, when to stop, right? It keeps on doing the task until unless you are passing a kill signal or terminating the process. So once it is started, it continuously does the execution unless you do the termination. So you're saying wait termination. You just wait, you don't terminate yourself, right? So this is the code which is basically giving us the word count. Okay, so let me execute it. Before executing, let me create a channel which would basically help us generate that input data stream. So I would take this nc-lk and paste it here for port number 9999. So when I enter it, it will not do anything, right? Here I have to pass the data like this. Okay, so this is an input channel where your data is getting generated. Okay, so any data that I am generating here would be the input for this code that I have just explained. Okay, and for executing this code, we use this command. Spark submit the code, and the input is from the localhost. Localhost means your computer, and the port number is 49. Okay, Spark submit is the function which executes this Python or Spark script, which is written in Python. So just do enter. So now it is starting to initiate the Spark execution. I would reduce the size here. Right. So let me now say hi, 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 hi. And you would be seeing that at 3 seconds. Okay, it is not recording. Okay, let me just. Yeah, it's basically giving me that. Within 3 seconds, whatever the data that you're getting, it is recorded. And on the fly, it is processing the number of counts as well. The number of words as well, right? So this is how Spark streaming solves the problem for real-time data that is getting generated. Right? On Twitter application, you might want to do some kind of sentiment analysis, for example. So there are a lot of words which are getting generated. Okay, anomaly detection, for example. a lot of words are getting generated on Twitter. Okay, 24/7, somebody is talking about a product, for example. You want to generate an alarm, right? So what you do, you constantly read this data, but you cannot just wait for the complete data to get generated, right? So rather than that, if you get the data regularly collected at certain intervals of time, then you can do processing on that, right? So rather than waiting, processing on small amount of data is better for certain industries. So for example, Maggie. So a lot of people are talking about Maggie, and you might want to monitor that sentiment analysis, right? So in such cases, you would do this kind of Spark streaming application where the data that is getting generated is recorded, right? And you identify whether the word is positive or negative by comparing it with the dictionaries. So you define some dictionaries upfront and then just say compare, right? And your code says it is positive or negative. Now continuously you're seeing that, right? So your output would say like word is positive, word is positive, word is positive, word is positive continuously, and suddenly there is a negative. So immediately, as soon as this negative is identified, negative word is identified, it should throw or it should alert the admin or the executives to look into why that sentiment has changed to negative, right? So this is one of the applications that you can try and implement using Spark streaming. All right. So this is about Spark streaming, guys. Do we have any questions? Yes, friends. Do we have any questions? No questions? All right. Now I want to announce something here. .360 MG in collaboration with InnoDataTix is launching this Jumpstart program. It's a scholarship program, annual scholarship program. And as part of the scholarship program, we are offering these 5 different programs. You might probably want to look at one of the programs, and on these programs, right, to get the scholarship, you need to write an exam. You need to first enroll, okay? And once you are enrolling, you would be given an exam. If you're a student, that's okay. If you are a working professional, then you have to write a written exam, and based on the qualification, you would get the discounts. Now, these discounts that I'm talking about are split in multiple ways. One first advantage that you get is these programs that you are getting or offered are at a discounted price, more than 40%. In fact, close to 60-70% discount is there. For example, Python and R program would be offered at a cost of 2,500 for students. Machine learning on cloud is offered at around 6,500 INR for students. For working professionals, it would be a little marginal higher, right? So that would be the cost of these programs. And just giving you an idea, you might want to probably look at the websites and get more insights on this. And on top of this, once you qualify on the exam, right, you would be given discount coupons for our regular programs. The regular programs that we are offering, you'd get discount offers or discount coupons that you can avail. It would start somewhere from 50% of discounts, right? So just take the opportunity, explore this, and probably might want to grab these opportunity of scholarship. Now the recording that we have done here, the session that is getting recorded, the R code, the code that I have executed, the Spark code, the documentation, all those things would be made available for you guys on our YouTube private channel. And in order to do that, get access for that, you need to provide the feedback on this Facebook page. Let me click on that. It's launching. Yes. So this is our Facebook page on which we would request people to I'm giving the link here. So you can probably provide your valuable feedback here. And you can take a screenshot and get back to us, and you would be getting access to all the content that you have just seen as part of the session, webinar session, and of course various other bunch of benefits on that private YouTube channel. All right, so that's basically about the Jumpstart and the contents that or the material that we have just executed in the session. Any questions anyone has on any of these things that we discussed just now? All right, friends, if no questions, then thank you so much. And I request and I hope everyone takes the advantage of the scholarship programs. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.